Hello and welcome to the channel. The federal government keeps dragging their leg as they fail to so far comply to court rulings to release the indigenous people of Biafra IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu. The latest now is they are saying Kanu is a flight risk, finding various ways of staying the court of appeal judgment. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you. Kanu, a flight risk, federal government tells Supreme Court. The federal government has filed 7 grounds of appeal against the October 13th Court of Appeal judgment, which discharged the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu. It asked the Supreme Court to set aside the judgment and restore the charge against the respondent to be tried at the trial court. The government, in a motion on notice in support of the appeal, is also seeking a stay of execution of the judgment of the court presided over by Justice Jumai Sanki, pending the hearing and final determination of its appeal, noting that the IPOB leader posed a flight risk. The notice of appeal dated October 18 was signed by the Director, Public Prosecution of the Federation, Mohammed Abubakar, Assistant Chief State Counsel, D. Kaswe and A. Aluko, and Senior State Counsel G. Nweze, Department of Public Prosecution, Federal Ministry of Justice. The appellant averred that the appellate court heard in law when it held that the trial court had no jurisdiction to try Kanu because of the extraordinary rendition of the respondent. It stated, there was no evidence laid by the respondent before the court of the first instance, and indeed before the court below, to show how he was allegedly abducted and rendered to Nigeria as required by Section 139 of the Evidence Act 2011, since he alleged that he was abducted without following due process of law. The appellant also contended that the court below erred when it held that the executive arm must not be allowed to benefit from the abduction of the respondent, when in fact, and by its judgment, the respondent was allowed to benefit from its illegality of disobeying the orders of the court when he jumped bail and was rewarded with a discharge from the charges pending against him at the trial court, thereby occasioning a miscarriage of justice against the state and the victims of the crimes perpetrated by the respondent. The government claimed that the appeal court was wrong by saying that how Kanu was brought back to the country can vitiate and indeed weaken the criminal charges of treason, treasonable felony, and terrorism brought against him. It added that the lower court made that decision without taking into account the fact that the nature of the entry of the respondent is not relevant in the determination of the charges against him. The appellant further stated that the appeal court justices failed to be bound by established judicial precedents on the mode of entry of a defendant charged with the commission of an offense established by the Supreme Court. The appeal court, the federal government noted, misdirected itself when it relied heavily on the Organization of African Union's conventions on the prevention and combating of terrorism, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and cases decided from foreign jurisdictions as against the substantive law covering the criminal procedure in Nigeria. The court below overlooked the submissions of the appellant with regards to the ACJA 2015, which takes its taproot from the Grundnorm Section 36 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, to the effect that it is the Administration of Criminal Justice Act 2015 that governs the trial of every Nigerian charged with the commission of a crime. This failure occasioned the miscarriage of justice, the appeal notice read. Subscribe, like, share, and comment, and please turn the notification bell on. Thank you. The federal government further argued that the court below heard in law when it discharged the respondent of the offenses mentioned in counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 15, bordering on terrorism offenses contained in the amended charge dated January 14, 2022, and retained by the trial court for want of jurisdiction. The appeal observed that the appellate court was completely silent and closed its eyes to the obvious facts of the issues which predate the rendition of the respondent because he was standing trial for conspiracy and treasonable felony terrorism before his escape. If the learned justice of the Court of Appeal had taken into consideration the act of illegality of the respondent in jumping bail and the corresponding duty of the appellant to ensure his presence in court, the decision of the court would have been different, the appeal read. In an affidavit, Love Me Odubo of the Department of Public Prosecution, Federal Ministry of Justice, stated that Kanu has a history of jumping bail and may be difficult to secure if the appeal was not granted. The affidavit read that the respondent is a flight risk person given his previous incident of jumping bail while standing trial. The respondent is a dual citizen of both Nigeria and Britain, which will make it easy for him to move out of Nigeria and escape justice. That the respondent's presence will be difficult to secure should the judgment of the court below is not overturned and set aside by the Supreme Court. There is a need to stay the execution of the judgment of this honorable court to avoid a situation where the judgment of the Supreme Court will be overreached and rendered nugatory. Meanwhile, the Southeast Caucus in the Senate has intervened in the case of the federal government against Kanu, urging that the ruling by the Court of Appeal be obeyed. In a statement jointly signed by 14 Southeast senators on Thursday, they advised the government against appealing the ruling at the Supreme Court, but rather asked the presidency to utilize the opportunity presented by the appeal court ruling and consider a political solution to solve the lingering problem in the interest of the country's unity and peaceful coexistence of Nigerians. The statement said, "This is the time to show magnanimity and statesmanship. The appeal court has provided the leeway for the authorities to walk the talk as ones desirous of preserving Nigeria's unity and respect for our diversity. Accordingly, we as a caucus and stakeholders in the Nigeria project appeal to Mr. President to remember the promise he made to a delegation of elders of Igbo land some time ago and release Nnamdi Kanu." The statement was signed by Senators Orji Kalu, Majority Whip, Chukwuka Utazi, Minority Whip, Eyinaya Abaribe, Ushe Ekwonife, Stella Odwa, Sam Egwu, Obina Ogba, Theodore Orji, Shimaroke Namani, Michael Nachi, Onyewushi Ezenwa, Rochas Okorosha, Frank Ebezim, and Ifeanyi Uba. The senator said that not honoring the ruling by the appeal court would ignite varied interpretations, which to all intents is injurious to the unity and corporate existence of the country. That's the news, guys. Thanks for joining in. Until next time, bye.